But in the last 30 years, I've learned a lot about the historical Jesus and his foremost disciple, perhaps wife, perhaps actually teacher. They lived and breathed and interacted as equals. This man from Palestine, this Middle Eastern Jew, was almost always seen in the presence of Mary of Magdala. Through archaeological digs that unearthed a Galilean settlement, such as the tomb of the high priest Caiaphas, and the discovery of the bones of James, the brother of Jesus, we now have physical evidence, DNA-tested artifacts, and historical documents that give substantial evidence that what we call Palm Sunday actually occurred. The stories in our Bible we teach in Unity are a metaphor for spiritual life, but we also have to realize some things actually happened in historical time, and some things were not as they were perceived in what we call the King James Version of the Bible, or even the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible. That document is a document that was most certainly made by men 300 years, over 300 years after Jesus lived. But let's get back to Palm Sunday for a moment. The audacity of Jesus riding in to the high holy days, to the procession of the very elite scribes and Pharisees on a donkey, while people were being paraded on stallions and elephants and camels painted with gilded harnesses and lifted actually on the shoulders of their slaves. This startling image that Jesus portrayed to the world, riding on a donkey, the creature used for ridicule and punishment of criminals, was his best message, his living demonstration of who he was. He came in solidarity with all humanity, saying, "My kingdom is not of this world. Do not judge by appearances." We definitely know that Jesus was crucified because of trumped up charges based on the anger, jealousy, greed, and fear of those in power who would stand in the way of spiritual progress for humanity. But this is not his most important legacy. During his trial and after his crucifixion, most of his disciples were so scared they were hiding behind locked doors and publicly denying him. Only Mary of Magdala, called the Magdalene, his partner, and his mother, Mary, and a few of his closest friends, Joseph of Arimathea, Salome, and Nicodemus, were with him to the very end of his physical life. And only one brave soul, Mary, the Magdalene, came alone in the morning to his tomb to anoint him. Like a flower that had bloomed many times over many lifetimes, she was his spiritual companion to the end. Not a harlot, a well-cultivated and enlightened soul. Some believe she was his wife. Others say she was his closest disciple. There is certainly ample evidence that she was one of the leaders of the movement who carried on his teachings, who risked her life, who lived in caves to escape the people who were trying to have her, her mother, and all of the first century Christians killed. There are historical records in ancient scriptures that say Mary of Magdala is the one, quote, who Jesus loved most. She stood with him at the cross until he took his last breath. And here is a depiction of her and how that must have been for her, as enlightened as she was, to watch this horrible act. This is from the Magdalene manuscript. I stood at Golgotha, wavering in my strength and overcome with grief as I watched the death of the man I loved and served with all my heart and soul. At the greatest moment of my torment, Mary reached out and touched my hand. I'd been alone in my grief and had not even noticed hers. Our eyes met, filled with tears, and we sobbed in each other's arms, she for her son, I for my beloved. The Gospels report that an earthquake struck right after Yeshua's passing, and I say to you, this is true. It was as if all of nature went into travail, and the earth shook with anger and rage that such a master, such a being, could suffer at the hands of his fellow man. But such is the paradox of earth. The presentation of Mary of Magdala, even in these altered scriptures we call the Bible, is compelling. She's important enough to be identified, an uncommon thing in male documents. She is identified by place and by name. And she is identified and mentioned in this way over a dozen times, more times than any other woman except Mary, the mother of Jesus, called by name, identified by place, described as a leader of a number of women who support the work of Jesus, quote, out of their own resources. She was obviously an integral part of the public life of Jesus. The confusion about her being the repentant woman of the streets, being a harlot, is attributed to Gregory the Great, a medieval priest whose slander of her good name, even at the time, in the 1200s, was not widely accepted. The Greek Orthodox Church, which has a very different Bible than the one we use, called the King James Bible, the Greek Orthodox Church paid no attention to this. The Roman Church appears to have used Gregory's interpretation simply to their patriarchal advantage. The King James Version, also called the Canonized Version, approved by the Roman Catholic Church, was declared the only true Bible, and all other manuscripts were ordered to be destroyed after the Council of Nicea in Turkey in the year 325. 300 years after Jesus had lived. This council of all male bishops excluded many important documents, and the bishops that were present, the historical evidence shows, fought to fisticuffs over what would remain in that book. Those who were unable to agree were excommunicated from the Roman Church, beaten, exiled, or killed. It is certainly time, over 2,000 years later, for us to redeem the true egalitarian tradition of Jesus and his companion, Mary of Magdala. We need the strength and the courage to do this now. Mary is our ancestor, our leader, an icon of all women and men of courage and compassion for all humanity, all those who would not exclude anyone, all those who call us to be brave have faith, and know our equality in God. She's a shining light of hope, a model of wholeness, a model of commitment to spiritual evolution for the entire Earth family. In every sphere of life when they lived, political, social, economic, religious, relational, medical, and cultural, Jesus and Mary questioned radically and turned upside down what was currently believed. These courageous teachers broke down barriers of social conformity and divisions between rich and poor, male and female, educated and disenfranchised. And they traveled the world with an amazingly diversified following of people. After Jesus spoke to the Samaritan woman at the well, his disciples were outraged that he had done such a thing. But he talked to them and taught them, and they stayed in Samaria, and they dined, and they lived, and they preached with the Samaritan people. They refused. I am talking Jesus and Mary and his mother and James, their family and all their closest friends. They refused to be separated from even lepers. People of all sects, countries, religions, and tribes were their people. Jesus taught and helped to heal everyone, people of all ages, any socioeconomic class. We know he befriended tax collectors and tax evaders, publicans, prostitutes, criminals, rich, famous, outcast, and marginalized. Why? Why would he do this? Why would he risk his life to do this? Here are some direct biblical references. He was moved with compassion for the crowds and he healed them. He was moved with compassion because they were distressed and dejected, like sheep without a shepherd. He dined with sinners. He talked to beggars. He mixed with the lowest class of the lowest people, and he identified with them. He was called a drunkard and a glutton and a friend of sinners and tax collectors. Charles Fillmore once said, Jesus did not represent that he had discovered a new way to save people, nor did he try to copyright his doctrine or label it in any way. He did not even give it a name. He knew that what he was teaching was universal, and that it was inherent in all people and dormant only because of ignorance. He came to remind humanity of the consciousness within them that they had forgotten or willfully ignored. I've been to Turkey and I've walked through the caves. There is evidence there in Cappadocia of caves that refugee Christians lived in to hide from being massacred. They lived inside mountains to survive. And there's a place there, a pilgrimage place, where they believe that Mother Mary died. There are also intricate caves and passageways in the south of France with much evidence that Mary of Magdala lived and taught there until she died. The teachings of Jesus and his spiritual legacy carried on by Mary the Magdalene, his mother, his friends, was never the exclusive possession of any sect or creed. And unity, by its very name, is challenged on this very point. We're a lot like the Samaritans, aren't we? We incorporate Christianity and a lot of other religions into what we do. Charles Fillmore taught, unity is a link. in the great educational movement inaugurated by Jesus Christ. Some of you may not know this, but when Unity was incorporated, it was not originally incorporated as a religious organization, but an educational nonprofit. Our objective is to discern, Charles Fillmore said, the truth and prove it. The truth we teach is not new, neither do we claim special revelations or discovery of new religious principles. Our purpose is to help and teach humankind to use and to prove the eternal truth taught by the Master. Paradoxically, when Jesus was asked by Pontius Pilate to defend himself and to answer this question, what is truth? Jesus remained silent. Truth is an inward search. Only glimpses of truth can be given in words or images. Truth, God, love, spirit, is a direct experience and knowing. Jesus and Mary, all the Marys, but especially the Magdalene, had immense compassion and love. They were kind. They consoled people over and over again, just like people are doing right now. They said, don't cry, don't worry, be of good cheer, do not be afraid. Their hearts went out to the people. They set to liberate them from suffering and anxiety. Jesus came walking into the world as the voice of our beloved, turning water into wine, singing a wedding song and proclaiming in his Aramaic language, Malkuta de la ha, Malkuta de la ha. The kingdom of God is at hand. The kingdom of God is within you. The kingdom of God is right here. In one of his Gospels, the Gospel of Thomas, he says, don't believe people when they tell you that the kingdom of God is in the sea. The fishes will get there first. Don't believe them when they tell you it's in the mountaintops. The birds will get there first. The kingdom of God is within you, and it's all around you. The good news that Jesus came to teach and that Mary of Magdala carried on was the Spirit of the living God dwells within each and every person on this earth, and we are all blessed with an inherent capacity to become true human beings. So on behalf of our ancestors, Jesus of Nazareth and Mary of Magdala, I say to you today, empower yourself, love yourself, heal yourself. Your faith will make you well. Stand forth in truth. Be brave. Be of good cheer. Wash your hands. Cover your face. Have due diligence. Pay attention to your health. Have faith in God and know the power and the potential within you and all around you. The energy released by Jesus' resurrection, by his ability to show people life is eternal, made 2,000 years later still, this energy available to all of us in our collective unconscious. So go there and bring forth that strength of that man who died with these words on his lips. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. This is your mother, this is your father. In other words, those of you still left here, take care of each other. Into thy hands I commit my spirit. That's a message to us all. Into the greater good, let's all commit our spirit.